It's the fact that somebody is that interested is just like, okay, that creeps me out. I don't want to be part of it. So I'm Eddy. I make software less bad for a living, or at least I try to, and I'm old. I think I was born in the 1960s. It's a very long time ago. The first time I actually used Linux was, I think, late '96, when I got myself a computer and assembled it out of pieces, because if you buy a whole computer, you have to pay Microsoft for a license for some software you're not going to use. And then the friends who helped me do that, who are competent sysadmins, said, "Oh, you'll want to, what do you want?" And I said, "A Linux distro, what do you recommend?" And they recommended Debian, so I started Debian on it and found myself perfectly happy with it. It had the things I'm used to using, because I'm used to working on Linux systems, and I've been using GNU tools most of the time for years by then already, so it was just natural to carry on using. And the main place I create text is in Emacs, and it sits quite comfortably inside that. Not as such. I'd noticed that various of my friends who'd been my colleagues in an earlier job were now working on another browser, and thought, well, give that a try. And upon giving it a try, discovered it had one or two features I had been missing and was happy to have again. So just kept using it, and it works nicely. So that's what I want. I've quite enjoyed the tab stacks. There's interesting usability complications that I gather people are working on, but it generally is really quite useful to be able to organize the far too many tabs I have when I'm using the browser. Well, that's complicated. It depends on the new user, really. I mean, it's what are you coming from, what are you used to, what do you know? The reason why Debian works nicely for me is that I am just used to using Unix-based systems. I'm used to the command line. I'm used to raw X servers. I don't use fancy X servers with like this Ubuntu you've got set up here has got this little taskbar that pops up. It's like, I have no interest in these things. And so, if that's where you're coming from, you're probably as old as me and have already chosen what sort of computer system you want to use. So there's no point me recommending Debian to you because you're already using it, or you're not, and that's your choice. But if I was talking to somebody coming to computers from a new perspective, I don't really know the landscape very well. I would probably by default recommend Ubuntu, just because they've clearly done a lot of work on making it easy for people who are not computer professionals to get started. Well, my favourite distro is indeed Debian, because I'm partly just because I've been using it for years, and everybody likes the thing they're used to. So if I were using something else, I might very well decide I liked it better. But this is what I've been using, because it is also influenced by the fact that I know enough people involved in its development and where it comes from and its history, that I have a certain faith in them as people to be delivering something that I can trust, not to be doing things that when I find out that's happening, I will go, they are not going to be installing spyware on my computer, and they are, the packages from a Debian apt server are going to be software I can generally trust. And if there was any reason to have something that I wouldn't trust, they'd put a big red flag on it and say, here's why it's here, but you wouldn't think twice for having it. I care more about whether I trust the people involved than anything else. Of course, the fact that it's all open source is a huge plus from my point of view as well. These days work in open source, and knowing that I can get at the source code has two really important consequences. One of them is if it's broken, I can fix it, which isn't much use to most people, but it is to me. And the other one is because it's open, because it's available to everybody, there are going to be other people looking at it, scrutinising it, going, is there anything here that needs to be fixed? In particular, are there privacy issues, are there security issues? And so if the software's source code is all out there and I can just go and look it up, it'd be very hard to hide anything pernicious in it. So again, it's about trust. I trust open source better than I trust anything that I can't get at the source code for, you know. Well, for me, they're a good combination for the boringly simple reason that I know the people developing Vivaldi. They're my friends, they're my former colleagues. I know that I trust them, so it is a fairly straightforward matter for me to go. Again, my biggest concern is trust, and yes, I do trust the people who are writing the software that's running on my computer. I indeed trust my former colleagues enough that I sent Rory the preferences file that he's got installed on this VM so that you can see how I use the browser, which, you know, the fact that the preference file doesn't contain sensitive information, I did study that, is a factor. But also the fact that, yes, I'm happy to share it with a friend who is a former colleague and who works for the people who make my browser. There is this thing that Jorn has a big concern about privacy, and he's acutely aware of the whole way that Google is sticking its nose into everything. And there's a certain level at which I don't really care whether I've got anything to hide. It's the fact that somebody is that interested is just like, okay, that creeps me out. I don't want to be part of it, you know. I don't want to have somebody watching me that closely, because why? Why are they that interested? That creeps me out, and I don't want it. Whereas knowing that this is a browser where the people involved aren't interested in finding out as much about me as possible. I mean, quite a few of them know me well enough anyway. So yeah, you know, the privacy is important. Security, I think at the moment, most of the browsers I am tolerably confident of their security. I mean, the major browsers are all tolerably competent. After all, Vivaldi is built on Chromium's back end, and if there were major security problems there, then that would be a concern also for Vivaldi. But my understanding is that the security is tolerably good these days. You know, there's no such thing as perfect security, but I mean, more importantly, it's the attitude of the person who's supplying the software. Are they trying to find out more about me than I'm conscious of? Or are they people who are just trying to provide me with a browser that is handy to use and works nicely and does the things I want? You know, and one of the things Vivaldi does is it gives me rather more control, of what I'm doing. So the first one is that there's a right-click option that brings up a menu, and one of the items in that menu is open link. You'd think this would be a stupid and obvious thing, that isn't that what links do? But somebody at some point decided to give web designers the freedom to make, when you click on a link, you get a new tab, whether you like it or not, or whether that makes sense to you or not. And I don't always want that. Now, there are times when it's totally appropriate. If it's to give some supporting information, then you can come back to continue filling in a form. Of course, it's a sensible thing to do. But if every link on a web page does this, it's just like, no, I don't want to have to open and close tabs all the damn time. I want to history navigate, and websites that do this annoy me. And so being able to just go, no, I'm going to follow that link in this tab, and then I'll come back in history when I'm done, and not have to search for the right tab to go back to after I'm done with the page I'm going to. That is a stupidly simple feature, which I missed in the browsers I've been using for a while, and getting it back was most welcome. So that's number one. Now let me see. Number two is, oddly enough, I have discovered the history navigation thing, where you click the mouse buttons, first the left one, then the right one, or the other way around, to move backwards and forwards in history. I like using history navigation. And so being able to do that just quickly from the mouse is actually, it's a terribly simple convenience. Tab stacking, which it's nice having tabs, but I have way too many. And being able to group the tabs by topic and category and what are they about, and so on my setup at home, this is just a VM we've got set up here. On my setup at home, I have a tab stack that is local pages on my own machine that are what I'm writing at the moment, or something I want to refer to routinely. And there's another tab with a bunch of cartoons I want to read every day. And there's various other tab stacks by topic, sorted and grouped and organised. And it just gives me a layer more of organisational structure. So the tab stacks are quite handy, really. So I think if we stick at 3, I'll stop there. My setup in Vivaldi, not actually quite the way I normally use it, because I normally have it on a portrait mode screen, which makes a world of difference to me. I can read a lot of text all in one go. This VM is set up on a landscape mode machine, so some things will be not quite as I'm used to, but that's not a huge deal. So let's see. I actually am just so used to my setup that I don't really normally consciously notice what I've done differently. So it's been helpful that Rory's pointed out to me which things I have actually done differently. And so one of these is I have my tabs at the bottom of the page, which I'm at least vaguely conscious I did customize at some point. And then the start page, I've got a swirly dark background, but I don't normally see that because it's got so many speed dials covering it that it's mostly hidden. But I don't have that part of the setup here on this config. We've only got my preferences here. And you might notice from this is my home page on the web, and some people have noted that it has a bit of a retro look. I started writing web pages in 94, about then anyway. And I've never really been very interested in being too clever with the styling. But I tend to be more interested in things that are about text than anything else. So there's me using the open link feature that's just so automatic. And so there's a whole bunch of pages, and I'm using the mouse gestures to come backwards and forwards. I can't really show the massive use of tab stacks that I have at home, but I would be moving from tab stack to tab stack, or within a tab stack from tab to tab. And let's see, what other things have I modified? I have vast amounts of bookmarks as well, usually on a great bar across the top here. A nice row of, again, hierarchically structured menus of bookmarks so that I can classify things by the things that go together, are together, and I can find them easily. I'm never in a huge hurry to invent new features. I mean, it's got a set of features I find useful. It helps me to just get on with doing what I want to do, and and that thing with the opening this tab, it lets me override decisions made by other people about how I shouldn't browse that I don't agree with them, and I get to browse as I want to, and I should look slightly more into its internal privacy settings and ad blocking and so on. But in fact, in practice, before it had ad blocking, I'd installed an extension, and the fact that it's got extensions is a useful thing that I just forget about because it's already there. It's every day. It's normal. So really, I find it useful. That is, to me, the highest good in a piece of software. It's useful. It does what I want it to do. There are, I have enough friends who have reservations about anything that isn't open source to respect the fact that they're not going to use it, and fair enough. I mean, as I say, a large part of why to me it makes total sense is I know and trust the people who develop it, and I can accept other people don't know them, so you know, they may have to think twice about that. But when it comes down to it, I trust them, and I would recommend most people do, because I know these people. I worked with them on a previous browser, which we won't talk about.